I'm Kevin von der Lippe, and with me here is Donald Arant, and we are with the Greensboro chapter of the NRHS. Our chapter has been around since the mid-'70s, and our mission is to educate and preserve railroad history. And so we try really hard to do that. And so the whole purpose of this program is to sort of take you down that path a little bit. Have you been to our space at the depot? It's a nice space. We share it with the model railroaders. We have some neat exhibits. We've been very aggressive in trying to collect Guilford County related railroad stuff. We have some stuff there outside of Guilford County. Most notably is we have a bell that is reportedly from the wreck of the old 97. There's about 12 of those out there, if you look, right? But I will tell you, the make and model of the bell matches. The fact that the bell doesn't have a number stamped on it, which would happen when it first went into the shop with Southern. That train wrecked before it was ever shopped, is a good sign. But probably the best is, and you can see it in our signage at the bell, is that it came from the family that cleaned up the wreck. They were hired by Southern Railway to clean up the wreck. So, and it's got damage and all that other stuff that you look for. So, is it? I think so, but there's no way to really know.
It's a wonderful exhibit. They've got a nice little museum. Their meetings are different than ours, except probably for May. I think in May we need to look at the third Monday in May, because the fourth Monday in May is Memorial Day. I don't expect anybody to want to come to a meeting on Memorial Day, so we probably will have a conflict in May, but other than that.
Yeah, and we're actually getting ready to experiment for a couple months with a Saturday morning meeting at the depot, so we could interface with the public a little bit too. So good. We got some stuff. This is an experiment, so I don't know how that's going to work. So part of our mission of,
That may last 1 month. Saturday.
Yeah, maybe. So in part of our ongoing mission to sort of collect and preserve history, we were approached by a gentleman named David Steinberg, who has written several books on depots across the country, Macon and Chattanooga and so forth. And he wanted to do a book on the Greensboro Depot. And he approached us, I think it was 2018, and asked us if we would help. And, noted author, yes, we're on board. And he wrote a basic outline and a basic first draft at it, and then retired on us. So we were like panicked, right? And so basically, as a chapter, we decided we wanted to move forward with this. And so I've never written a book. I'm not a writer. I'm just a guy who likes trains, right? But I called Arcadia, which is where he had his contract with, and amazingly was able to get a contract with Arcadia. So Arcadia is a real publisher. They handle everything. It's not like a vanity press sort of thing. And so we had to sign a contract and sign all sorts of deadline stuff. And we penned that in November of 2019 with the thought that everything would be in their hands in like July or August. I don't know what I was thinking. That was moronic, just for the record. And then, of course, luckily, COVID happened and we got some time, because getting photographs for these books are not easy. And so we were struck with, David sort of looked at the world as a depot sort of project. And we think probably a lot broader than that. And Greensboro has a rich history of depots, and just a rich history of depots downtown, not including all the other stuff that's now within Greensboro limits, like Guilford College and all these other places that had depots of their own as the city, swallowed them up. And so we sort of started with this. I mean, that's the depot, the Galyon Depot. That's where our club meets, our chapter meets. And we really kind of wrestled, should we start with this building or should we go a little bit deeper? And we decided that we really needed to go deeper. And not only cover what was its predecessor, but also the whole history of Guilford County, because as it relates to railroads, because it is pretty interesting. In in the 1820s, there was some talk about how do we further economic development in North Carolina, and there was a paper written by Caldwell called "The Numbers of Carlton," and it looked at how can North Carolina advance, right, without some sort of transportation hub. We don't have rivers and canals like some of the other eastern states have, and so they were just trying to figure out how can our state manage this. And of course, at that time there really wasn't railroads, but the governor of North Carolina, Governor Moorhead, picked up on that concept of North Carolina needing a tree of life, right? Something that would take commerce from the coast, from Wilmington, up to the mountains. And because of his work, his hard work, and the work of others, our state adopted this plan for a North Carolina railroad, which is where Donald works. That's why he has a job. So he appreciates Governor Moorhead. And so in the 1840s, they put this plan together and they adopted it. And it was really truly driven by Governor Moorhead. Governor Moorhead lived in Greensboro. His homestead is Blandwood. It still stands. And if you look at sort of, I wish I would have put it in here. I didn't. A map of North Carolina. They were sort of thinking coast towards Charlotte. That line really shouldn't go up to Greensboro, right? But surprisingly, there was a governor living in Greensboro, so it instead of going through Asheboro, it jumps up and comes through Greensboro, and they turned the shovel in 1851 and had a railroad running in 1852, right? In Greensboro, that's where they did that. And so this building was long time by a lot of historians in Greensboro called the Richmond and Danville Depot. I mean, this is how people referred to it. And we started doing our research, and this is really a 1857 North Carolina Railroad Depot. It is their first passenger station in Greensboro. It is the first passenger station in Greensboro. It's a block building. By the time this picture was taken, it was much, much later and was not being used as a depot anymore. And so as we were, dragging through this, our project took on more importance, I think, from our chapter standpoint. This is from the tax records. Kind of neat, huh? You can find the floor plans for it. I don't know if my little pen won't work, but this little square here, this 12 by 10 or so square, is why this depot didn't stay a depot, passenger depot, for very long. 10 by 10 room, roughly, is not really enough space. And so this depot survives the Civil War, and then they start working on replacements for it. They didn't tear this thing down. They moved it a little bit, built a wooden depot in between the tracks to handle the passenger depot, passenger traffic. And the first photograph that you saw there came from the History Museum. The drawings came from the Southern Railway Historical Society in Chattanooga. And this comes from the Greensboro Library. This was another thing that we had while we're going through this process. We had to use a lot of sources to sort of piece together the picture. And this article is awesome because this was actually written in 1926, a day before they tore it down to make way for the new depot. And in the article, it actually has a story in there from a person who rode the train from Burlington to Greensboro during the Civil War with his father. So you get firsthand account. We know that was the Civil War depot. Isn't that neat? Wow. And so, we argue, some professional historians argue about the date and all that other stuff on this building. And so I might be hubris, but I'm right on this. It's 1857. So, it's just neat. And we did our research, and we found records that nobody else in the history world had. this is really out of order. This is not the second railroad into town. We back up. This depot served the second railroad also, which was the Piedmont. That's the line that goes from Danville into Greensboro. It was built by the Confederate States, ran by the Richmond and Danville. We'll talk about that in a second. Like I said, I got my slides out. This is really the third railroad into town. This is the Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley, right? And the building to the left, that two-story building is the depot. The building in front of you is on Goral Street, and that was their headquarters. The Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley was actually founded in the 1850s, 1852, as the Western Railroad of North Carolina. It was meant to take coal from a place called Egypt, which is now Cumnock, down to Fayetteville. And then in Fayetteville, it was transloaded onto barges and then shipped down to Wilmington on the Cape Fear River for the steamships. That railroad became the Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley. It survives the Civil War by hiding their engines in the coal mine in Egypt, and then slowly building up and eventually coming to Greensboro. Here's another picture. The depot is up between the two poles. The turntable in the front is for the Southern Railway. It's right off of Elm Street, where Elm Street is today. And back here, if you're standing between me and the TV, back over here is another turntable for the Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley. So a lot of railroad right in the middle of downtown. This is that same Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley depot, probably about this one's 1916, but it took this shape about 1905. This is out of the ICC stuff for taxes. The two-story part is the original 1880s depot, and on both sides they have a one-story structure that was done by the Southern Railway and used as a freight house. And so the Cape Fear moved their passenger depot to the main Southern depot at the time. Just a little bit of backstory. They said Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley survived the war, went through some iterations. They purchased another railroad that had not laid track, but had bought the right-of-way between Greensboro and Mount Airy, and they made that process all the way from Wilmington to Mount Airy. Survived up until the silver panic of 1893, and like so many other railroads, like the Richmond and Danville, went bankrupt during the panic. Right? It's also the silver panic. It killed a lot of railroads during that time. When that railroad went up for auction, there were two railroads bidding on it: the Wilmington and Weldon, and the Southern Railway. And they went back and forth, and they weren't coming up with a winner. And Sam Spencer, the president of Southern, got up, went over to the president of Wilmington Weldon, said, "For joint account," and walked out. And that was the shenanigans that the railroads did back then. So Wilmington and Weldon ended up with the Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley, renamed it the Atlantic and Yadkin. That would have been February of '99. And in May of '99, because it went through bankruptcy court and the court said they could not split the railroad up, Wilmington Weldon sold the entire railroad to the Southern Railway, right? Complying with the bankruptcy court rules. Then on the same day, within a couple hours, the Southern split it and sold the part from Sanford back to Wilmington and the South Carolina line to the Atlantic coastline, which had already purchased the Wilmington and Weldon. Clever, huh? Of course, they went right into lawsuits. Lawsuits lasted until 1929. But anyhow, I love this photograph. So when you look at this photograph, you see horse and buggies and ice in the real back. You see an ice wagon. It's just neat stuff. But if you look right here, and it's a little hard to see, you see that? That's a car. No headlights, but it's a car. Somebody was hot shit in Greensboro in 1916 with their car, because that's pretty impressive. Neat stuff, lots of machinery being transferred. So neat depot. Here's that depot again, this time taken in the 80s. This depot could, on their dock side there, loading dock side, they could manage 3 tracks of trains. Right? Think about that. And they did that by having the dock, 2 tracks, another dock, and another track. And they had drawbridges that dropped down to go to the center docks. Kind of neat. So in 1899, Greensboro needed a new depot. This is the one they built. They built it on Elm Street. It is quite the clever building. 20 years ago, I saw something on eBay with this postcard, and I didn't buy it because I was a dummy. And it was handwritten on the front and on the back. And it was a letter from a young lady back to her dad, complaining about Raleigh's Depot and how outclassed it was by Greensboro. Right? And if I would have been smart, I would have bought it, but I didn't want something with writing all over it, and I bought the clean blank one. So much for that. I wish I would have thought ahead. But anyhow, this depot is a super neat depot. This particular photograph did not make it in the book because I didn't have permission to use it. But a neat depot. In 1899, it was a self-contained building, meaning it made its own power. It had its own power plant in the basement and its own heat in the basement. And it also provided steam for other nearby railroad structures. So really quite the nifty building. Very nifty building. And look, here's that building today. This building sits on North Carolina Railroad property and was property of Norfolk Southern. Donald, via his railroad, recently purchased it and is in the process of restoring it. And so the banner just came up, and Donald actually asked me to take this picture. I was downtown Greensboro at the time, and this is a super lucky picture because he called me. I stepped out. There was no car, and there was no train, and there was no man there. And I lined up, and I hear that's the city of Greensboro coming by. I said, whoa, I'm going to wait on the train and make a nice picture. Of course, a car pops in, and this homeless guy steps in the middle of the picture, drops his pants completely, and puts on his red pajama pants. So luckily, when I got the train, I got his pants on. So, it's a good picture. So anyhow, yeah, neat thing. Donald, you can see he has a barcode or a QR code up there, and getting ready to start renovations, getting ready to do a fundraiser, which our chapter is going to help him with. So really exciting times. This is a great historic building. If you see the little picture up there, Donald has it back with its pitched roof. Yeah.
So the witch's hat will come back at some point, ideally?
Okay.
If not, you can blame Donald. He lives in Witset. You can ride by and throw eggs. So anyhow, neat thing. So we talked about it a little bit. When you look at railroads in Greensboro, it all comes back to this man. I mean, that's Governor Moorhead. Shockingly, this is the invitation to the groundbreaking. It survives. I mean, that's 1851. It survives. It's a piece of paper. The Greensboro History Museum happens to have this. They were very helpful, along with a lot of archives. But not only did he bring the North Carolina Railroad to Greensboro, there was a railroad that ran from Greensboro to Winston-Salem. He was responsible for that. He was responsible for the Confederate States of America bringing the Piedmont into Greensboro, because there were lots of options then, and a lot of resistance to us connecting with another state. But his presence in Greensboro made that happen. And so Yeah, I mean, they would come into Greensboro. Here is the Piedmont Railroad, and you can see it says Confederate States. It's a waybill. There's not a whole lot of stuff that survives from that time period from this railroad. We do have a chunk of rail, though, that's kind of interesting from that. We, yep. And so we talked about briefly about the Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley, and that's not a picture of Moorhead there, but Moorhead had a hand in this. Any guess why? The gentleman on the left is Colonel Julius Gray. He was a wheel in founding the Battleground Company that preserved the battlefield in Greensboro. He was Greensboro's first Chamber of Commerce person, president of Chamber of Commerce. He was president of the Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley. And he lived at Blandwood, which is Governor Moorhead's house, with his wife, who was Governor Moorhead's daughter. So son-in-law. So there you go. It all leads back to Moorhead, doesn't it? The book in the middle is a Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley rules book, and on the right is the reportedly last passenger ticket purchased on the Atlantic in Yadkin in 1939. The picture and the ticket are from the Historical Museum, and the middle is from us. So you can tell, I mean, Greensboro's got this interesting history, right? I mean, it's got all these railroads. The nickname for Greensboro is the Gate City, and it's because of the railroads. If you look at it, and I don't have a picture of it here, it's in the book though, there's a big map in the main concourse that was done by Southern Railway. And Greensboro looks like the hub of a spoke wheel, right? All these railroads coming up from Wilmington, going to Mount Airy, coming from Raleigh, going to Charlotte, from Greensboro to Winston-Salem and on. It's quite impressive. And so the depot, the 1899 depot, was built mainly because of the city's support. There were a lot of people. Donald did a lot of research on this in Chattanooga on the 1899 depot, and there were a lot of civic leaders that really pushed and pushed and pushed to build that 1899 depot. What they didn't get was that Greensboro outgrew that depot so fast. The population change was enormous between 1899 and World War I. I mean, Greensboro was out of control in the growth. I mean, just wildly expanded the population. And so by the end of World War I, that depot was outdated. It couldn't handle the traffic. They had already moved the tickets out to downtown to another building because they couldn't manage the people traffic. And so the Southern Railway in Greensboro were operating out of multiple buildings all around town. And those civic leaders, some of the same ones that pushed for the building of the 1899 depot, started pushing the city for a bigger depot. And it was contentious. I mean,
What brought all the people there?
Industry, Cone Mills being a big chunk of it,
Okay.
a lot of industry.
Is that why all 6 of those lines ended up going to Greensboro?
Moorhead was the reason they were all in Greensboro, but the population was because of the mills.
Okay.
We had textiles. You know, Cone Mills was blue jeans, and we had Wrangler or Bluebell. We had a lot of manufacturing sort of just dropped into Greensboro.
But the manufacturing probably arrived because of the railroads. You have good transportation bringing the raw materials
So-
and to send out the.
So Cone Mills built without railroads, and then the railroads went to them, for sure. And Atlantic and Yadkin served them. But yeah, all of a sudden, when they started buying what they were buying, just tons of coal and shipping lots of stuff, yeah, it snowballed. They went from 1 factory to 6, or, I mean, really, how they took, and then there's all that. This is what's going to go on with Toyota now. We saw in today's paper, there's another facility opening up in Liberty. It snowballs. And so, you had textiles and you had furniture, and they were really big here. So anyhow, you get this depot that's not serving the people anymore, and the community screaming for it. Our solution was to publicly fund it by bond. That caused a lot of heartburn. There were, not in Greensboro's case, but in other cities across the country, there were a lot of civic lawsuits around that. And it basically panned out that it was okay, but it played a part in delaying the project for a little bit. And so by the time they figured out how they were going to fund it and who was going to fund it, and sort of figured out how the plan was going to be, and the city of Greensboro fought Southern Railway on this. So, there was debates on where the depot should be located. They wanted it on Elm Street. It's not practical on Elm Street, so they ended up putting it on Washington Street where it is now, and they got on it. And one of the things that I found fascinating as we look at these photographs is the more you look at them, the more amazing that time period must have been. I mean, 1926, you have just a convergence of technology all happening at one time. Here you've got a steam shovel with gasoline-powered truck behind it and a car behind that, and a lot of labor. One of the first things they had to do to make all this work was they had to get the railroad and the grade crossings at least reduced, the number of grade crossings reduced. There's a lot of reasons for it. This is in preparation of the Davie Street underpass. And so what they do is they go in, which is just ground, and they drive piles in, right? So they can build a temporary trestle on top of it, and they dig out the dirt underneath it so the trains don't stop, because Southern was not going to stop trains. Here's another picture of that working. That 1899 depot would have sat right above this sort of pile of sand right there on the street.
You mentioned there was a bunch of coal that came in. Where'd that come from?
Southern Railway wanted the coal to be purchased from their lines, but Cone Mills was serviced by the Atlantic and Yadkin, which was owned by Southern, but they got in a fight over coal, and so they were bringing it in from the N&W and from other locations, Virginia and C&O. They fought about it big time. So
There was no narrow gauge anything then?
not here, no. Not here, nope.
The Atlantic and Yadkin actually is the one that owned the railroad from Winston to Greensboro that goes to Kernersville?
No, that's the Northwest.
Oh, that's right, the Atlantic and Yadkin went up Battleground Boulevard.
Atlantic and Yadkin went from Wilmington to Greensboro to Mount Airy.
Yeah, but it went up through.
Battleground,
Went north
yeah.
out of Greensboro.
Yep, absolutely, followed Battleground.
Right, okay.
So the building behind it with the box cars is a freight warehouse for the Southern, one of several freight warehouses. Here's another picture of the same thing. You can see that they're upgrading it to a girder bridge. Once again, you can see just all sorts of nifty equipment in the background. It's
the beginning of the Davie Street underpass.
Yeah, Davie Street underpass.
Yeah.
So very, very neat pictures. That picture there was taken from the Clegg Hotel. Actually, you can see it up in the upper left-hand corner. Clegg Hotel was a railroad hotel. And actually, our chapter just helped the Greensboro History Museum preserve a 20-foot or 25-foot long itinerant painter who came in and painted a Southern Railway passenger train on canvas for their hotel. So we gave the museum some money to help preserve it. This is a picture looking where the cutout is under the temporary trestle. That's what's going to become Davie Street underpass. One of the water towers that was still standing, there were two water towers at that time, and one of them's already gone. Another picture with just more neat equipment, and that's some sort of cement mixer. You can see the Watchman Tower over on the right. Another picture, sorry?
All of the shops in where they worked on the trains and whatnot, is that all there as well?
At the depot?
Yeah.
So, no, the southern,
Where do they maintenance their trains?
So Greensboro has had a roundhouse
Yeah.
and some basic shops. That's farther south or
Railroad West.
yeah west of this area. This is downtown,
Yeah.
and so they were not far. What's that? About 2 miles? About 2 miles down the railroad.
So basically, it was just a hub for brand textiles.
Mhm.
That was it. That was
Well, and of course agricultural products and some some minerals.
Just merchandise.
Yep.
And they didn't do much work there.
No.
per se. Okay.
No. So I thought this was a neat picture, and one of the things that we sort of figure out when you get to drill into this stuff is there's really some neat stuff to learn. This is 060 switcher, number 1684. It was built in 1904. It was leased a lot of times to the Atlantic and Yadkin to do switch work in Pomona Yard, which is in Greensboro. So just, I mean, nifty. I mean, and so it was running another 15 years or more in Greensboro, pretty much as Greensboro switcher. Another picture, you can see the Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley Depot, which is now a freight house off to the right. They did a lot of work fast. Here's the Davie Street underpass with the final girder bridge in place. Really nifty thing, still stands today. Doesn't say Southern on it. The road's a little lower than it is in here, but basically looks the same. They used all sorts of equipment. I think I've said that before. They used gas power bulldozers and cranes. They used steam. You can see the vertical boiler steam engine to the left of this thing right here. So this is a guide derrick, meaning these wires are guy wires, and the little vertical boiler engine is what, sorry about that. The vertical boiler engine is what drives that equipment. I probably missed, there's a picture we that had trucks, wagons, steam shovels, all in the same picture, right? 2 or 3 wagons with big teams of horses, a couple gasoline-powered trucks and a steam engine, all in the same picture, excavating where they were putting in those piles for the underpass. So it's just a really, really neat thing. Here's a more completed aerial picture of that underpass. Another photograph that I just find amazing, this is demolition work as they're getting ready to build the depot. And of course, there's buildings along the railroad, and they knocked them down. If you look, see the derelict truck in the front here? If you go from that steering column straight up on the second floor of that building, that's a press. Why is there a press just sitting there? It must have been a printing press. I mean, it's a printing press of some sort, but just weird what you find in photographs. Anyhow, it's a neat picture. Now, this is a neat picture too for a variety of reasons. When they designed this depot had some pretty innovative thoughts, and one of them was passenger protection. And what you're seeing here with this metal work in this gap here is the building of tunnels to go to the platforms, right? So passengers would not have to cross the track. They would go in through the tunnel and come up on the platforms. And just very nifty. They had 3 platforms back when they built this thing. Now there are 2. Then they've got 2 tunnels now, not just 1. But they recycled this 1 tunnel. So neat, just super neat. This is the digging of the foundation for the main depot. And it sort of brings into view the other type of labor. We talked about steam engines, we talked about gasoline engines, we talked about horsepower. There are a lot of manpower, a lot of manpower. It was cheap, and that's what they used. And you'll see every photograph, just tons of people with shovels and picks and lifting heavy things. Another picture of the building of the foundation. The building behind it is the Jefferson Standard Building. At one time, when that was built in the teens, the joke was, what floor do you live on? It was the biggest building in the Southeast. The president of Jefferson Standard was a gentleman named Julian Price. And when we talked about that Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley becoming the Atlantic and Yadkin, and then immediately getting sued because they bifurcated the line, the Southern Railway took a lot of heat and went through a lot of court cases. The North Carolina Industrial Commission, everybody was beating them up over it because they wanted this tree of life, they quote Moorhead, you wanted this continuous line from Wilmington to the mountains. The Southern Railway, being clever people that they are, went to Julian Price, who in an earlier life worked for the Southern Railway in Virginia, and they made him president of Atlantic and Yadkin. So they got the most powerful guy in Greensboro, probably in the Southeast, to help stamp down our government. And it worked, right? His son-in-law, Julian Price's son-in-law, was Joseph McKinley Bryan, Joe Bryan, Bryan Boulevard, Bryan Park, Bryan School of Business Economics, that Joe Bryan. So yeah, they had it wrapped up. He was the treasurer for the A&Y. Another picture of laborers working. This girders here are probably with the underpass, the tunnel.
Where the tracks go across.
Yeah.
And all the carriage loads.
Yep.
And who owned all this? Who owned it?
Southern Railway.
Southern owned it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Southern Railway was born out of the death of the Richmond and Danville, which along with the Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley and a lot of other railroads died in the Silver Panic of 1873. Nifty picture of it going up. More neat pictures. One of the things that we found is this thing on the left someone's got their thumb in the picture, is a steam pile driver. And the Southern Railway only had a few of them. And I think we have photographs of 3 of them on the job, 3 out of 5 maybe, were here on this project. And so it's kind of neat that you can go and look this stuff up and learn all about their derricks and when they were built and who built them. This other thing on the right is in that underpass for the tunnel, for the passenger tunnel. And it's amazing. It's a half-tracked, half-wheeled thing with a scoop and a tank on it. It's probably a cement mixer. But they were inventive on what they were using for equipment. This is a little bit later picture. You see the passenger platforms are in place. There's a water spigot that's right there by the baggage cart, right behind the lamp post, and the wooden water tower has been replaced by a giant metal one right by the depot. So kind of nifty.
Kevin?
Yep.
If we're looking at this, first of all, are we looking east or north?
You're looking towards Raleigh.
Looking towards Raleigh, okay. So therefore, the railroad line, the H line to Burlington is that track on the far right.
Yes,
That's right.
that's correct. The H line's to the right. Yep.
And Dave, you were asking about Pomona Yard. Pomona
It's
Yard
behind.
was actually where the Southern Railway split. You know, it goes pretty much directly kind of southwest of the station. But Pomona Yard is where the line splits to go to Winston-Salem. And then on down to, it actually goes on to Charlotte. That's another program.
That's another program.
But that's why the yard ended up in Pomona. It was the split between the line to Winston, the line to Salisbury.
So just to give you a little orientation, if you're on the left set of tracks, you're heading to Danville. You're in the middle set of tracks, you're heading towards Raleigh, Burlington. And if you're on the right, far right, you're going into the Atlantic and Yadkin Yard, where that freight depot was, the old 1880s freight depot. This is a picture, this is looking towards, this is standing on what used to be the Piedmont on the line, coming down from Danville, looking towards the depot area, right? Looking towards downtown. And they're putting in girder bridges to go under what is Washington Street. And once again, just a fantastic picture with all the camp cars in the background. I mean, just, you don't see pictures of those, and it's just, there's a ton of them here, and these are wonderful, sharp photographs. Some more pictures of that same area. On the right that's Washington Street, and the building still stands that's there. It's downtown Greensboro now. So just super nifty stuff.
Kevin, if I can add, the railroad was open for business at this time. The track you see in the foreground of that right-hand picture is actually the live track where the trains would pass while they built that bridge, so it was like a shoe fly track.
Yeah.
I bet that was one busy piece of railroad.
Yeah.
Trying to funnel all that traffic into one track.
We didn't really talk about it, but maybe now's a good time. We remember the 1899 depot. That's the one that Donald's restoring with the big peak. You saw the picture of it with his banner on it. It's missing the whole top, right? All of that's gone. That depot, the Greensboro Depot, opened in April of 1927, and they moved all of their other offices to the 1899 depot, lock, stock, and barrel, right? And so they closed all these various Greensboro offices and consolidated it into that 1899 depot. And they were in there working on December 15th, 1927. So the other the other depot was only open for a few months. At 7 a.m., and they heard crackling noises, and they smelled smoke. But they worked for the Southern Railway, which means they sat their butt in their seat. All right? Because you sat down when the whistle blew, and you got up when the whistle blew, and the rest of the time you belonged to Southern Railway. And so the whole top of that building was on fire, and they didn't get up. Somebody outside of the railroad called the fire department to say the building was on fire. That building fire was so big that it was what they call a general alarm fire, which means every fireman in Greensboro and every fire truck in Greensboro had to respond. Everybody was at that fire. Huh?
Southern did nothing?
They got out when the building, they got out when the firemen arrived. Yeah.
Fire department was responding, and
So
they burned the entire pitch roof, second floor.
if you go to the Greensboro History Museum on the second floor, there's a steam pumper, a steam fire truck, with the big brass boiler on it. Even that, which was already semi and retired, it was a reserve fire truck at the time, was called out to this fire. To give you a perspective on what it was like to work for the Southern Railway, you know what the Southern Railway said about the fire? We're happy to announce that the Crescent was not delayed more than 15 minutes.
Did anyone get hurt?
No. They arrested a few people, though, for running over fire hoses. So the railroad was, on all this, the shoe fly track brought that to mind. The railroad didn't stop trains. The whole building's on fire, inches from the tracks, and they didn't stop trains. Didn't care about the firemen or anybody else. They were going to run their trains.
How the heck did one line take care of the traffic going multiple directions?
I'm sure it slowed it down, but yeah.
My goodness.
Yep. This is a neat picture of one of the sheds, one of the passenger sheds with some baggage cars. This is not a good picture, but this is the REA building, the roof of the REA building. I have this in here because that's our space. Our chapter has a library, and the model train people have their layout under those two skylights. So the skylights are over our space. The building behind it is the same building, but the second story was part of Greyhound office space, which is now gone. Greyhound went bankrupt and did away with all their office space. And downtown Greensboro has their ambassadors there now.
What are the model train pit folks? What are they modeling?
HO and N scale The HO is Greensboro.
Okay.
Greensboro to the mountains, Greensboro to Asheville. One of the things that we talked about briefly was this passenger safety thing. There was a tremendous amount of heartburn around the car accidents that happened in and around Greensboro. And so the lowering of the roads over at Davie and at Washington were meant to reduce the number of car accidents. Elm Street still, this is Elm Street right here. Elm Street still has a grade today, but you can go one quick turn about, 50 feet to your left, and you can go under the railroad and be safe. I don't know that they'll ever close Elm Street, and I don't think we'll ever tunnel underneath Elm Street.
Been tried a few times, but.
Yeah. So there's still accidents right here. So sad to say. So all this stuff moved at a pretty rapid rate. I mean, they started construction in 1926, and this is probably February of 27. They moved. You can't build a building this big now. Anybody guess how many square feet this building is?
4,000.
65,000 square feet.
Are you kidding?
Nope, it is giant. It is by far the largest depot in the Southeast. And bigger than anything Atlanta had. It's ginormous.
How did they build that in less than a year?
They put people on. Yeah, they put a lot of people on it, as you saw. You know, talking about this, it's kind of hard to escape where Greensboro was in 1927. What you're looking at, the main entrance of this depot, is the white entrance, right? There is a colored entrance to this depot. It is not a bad space. It's not as big, but it had all the same amenities, even down to lunch counters and all that. But it was separate. Nothing you can do to escape that. That was just part of the history.
Is it still there?
Yes, it still stands.
If I could just interject here, the thing that amazed me the most one time I came in, and I really think that Greensboro, and maybe we can talk about this later, Greensboro needs to do something. That is probably the most perfectly preserved Jim Crow space I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
They still got the train boards up. I mean, it is incredible. You can't get in there now because the DMV's in there, and they don't, I think they only open the doors if you knock, and so, but it's really amazing, the Jim Crow part of the station.
So just a little side note. In 1973, our Model Railroad Club was founded. And so 50 years ago, right? We signed a lease, the Model Railroad people signed a lease with Southern Railway in 1975, and we moved in. So next year will be 50 years in this depot. And so the Southern Railway gave us the lease. They were still running passenger trains there, right? They gave us the colored waiting room, and that's where we built our model railroad. And so we occupied the space, and I think we're careful enough to try to preserve all that stuff that Dutch just mentioned. We didn't paint over or damage or destroy anything. I mean, we did put up walls to protect stuff, temporary walls to protect stuff. But in 1979, when they stopped running passenger trains and turned it over to Amtrak, it went out to Pomona, 1981, I think. This building was done. And the only people in there to run off the homeless people, put out the fires, and pump out the basement was our Model Railroad Club. And they did it. We did it. And then the Southern gave the building to the city of Greensboro, and the city let us keep the same lease, the exact same lease.
Why did you give business to Amtrak?
Pardon?
Why did you give the business to Amtrak?
They were about the last ones to do that. Amtrak, was nationalized because none of the railroads wanted to be in passenger service. They were losing money on it. At its peak, there were over 42 passenger trains a day at this depot. That's a lot of passenger trains. Today, there's 12, which is still a staggering amount.
It's more than just about any other place in the southeastern United States outside of Florida.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. So we have 12 passenger trains a day. I mean, in Greensboro, for goodness grief. These are just a couple interesting pictures. These are not in the book. This was taken by a gentleman named Bill Schaefer. It's taken from the 1899 depot, which at the time was the Eastern District headquarters for the Southern Railway and Norfolk Southern later. This one being 1973, it would have been Southern. The old 1899 depot in the 70s was still standing and alive and well. That building burns down in the late 80s. Yeah, that was a homeless thing. Another neat picture from 1971 from Bill Schaefer. The cars are crossing over the Davie Street underpass, and the engine's getting ready to cross Elm Street.
That's the Piedmont, isn't it? The Southern Railway Piedmont?
Should be.
Yeah.
Daylight.
Daylight train, Washington, Atlanta.
Yeah. This is another interesting picture. This is after Amtrak has taken over and has moved out to Pomona. And it doesn't take long for the depot to start becoming a little snaky, is it? So this is looking towards the Jefferson Pilot Building. So it's looking sort of northwest. A couple pictures here that you don't normally see ever is they had mail service, right? And they handled a lot of mail. Even in '62, that's a open air mail transfer. Kind of crazy, huh? That's a generator building for the trains, kind of neat. Another nifty picture. So the main entrance, if you look carefully, you can see over here it says colored entrance. That's the colored entranceway. And so they came in separately. They had lunch rooms and newsstands and all that, but they ticket windows, all that was separate. But when they left, they both went into the same rotunda and took the same tunnel and went onto the platforms together. Here they would have separated, right? Depending on what car they got in. The blacks would have had to gone into a partition car, a car that was just set aside for black transport, and that would have been like that everywhere in the South up to Maryland, right, to the Mason-Dixon line, and then those cars were cut off, and the population was integrated as it went up north. And when the trains came back down, they got to the Mason-Dixon line, they had to put in partition coaches and separate people out. The railroad, Southern Railway, hated this, did not want to do this. It cost them money. They couldn't understand it. There's plenty of records in the archives that shows that they didn't like it. But they had to do it because it was the law here. It was the Jim Crow laws were certainly part of it. Interestingly, before the Civil War, Donald's Railroad didn't care. Right? The North Carolina Railroad didn't care. If you had money for a ticket, you could get on the train. It wasn't until after the Civil War and all the carpetbagging and all that stuff that happened that drove the Jim Crow laws. So, you know, it is. There's another photograph that I really wish I could have put in the book. I cannot because I can't get permission for it. You just can't identify who owns the rights to it. This is an Atlantic and Yadkin 10-wheeler. It's a passenger train. It came from the RF&P. They bought 3 10-wheelers from the RF&P. This is one of those 3. They had a 4th 10-wheeler that was leased from the Southern Railway. The first train into the Greensboro Depot in 1927 was an Atlantic and Yadkin train. So it was a Union station.
15 minutes.
Okay, I'm almost done. So this is Doug Galyon. The depot is now named after him. In 2001, they remodeled the entire depot. They spent over $31 million. They spent a lot of money trying to preserve the depot.
Did they preserve it?
Yeah, yeah, very nice. And so it was paid for mostly with federal money. The city chipped in a little bit. Doug Galyon was the political head of DOT and a Greensboro wheel for many years. And so they named it after him, and what a great person. Really neat, and glad that he did it. And that's how this book sort of happened. So I'm glad to answer any questions. You know, it has been a real interesting journey in history as we went through this. Learned a lot of stuff that I don't think any of us knew. And so the book, we have a few of them here. 100% of the book that we sell here, all that money goes to the Greensboro chapter of the NRHS. Myself or David do not collect a penny ever. So any royalties and all that stuff goes to the Greensboro chapter. So it's just going to help preserve the history. There are some, I think, wonderful, neat pictures here that sort of speak to the different times. One of my favorite pictures in the book is during the war. There's a family traveling by train, and the baggage porters are two young men wearing Sea Scout uniforms, like Boy Scouts, right? And they proudly wear their Eagle Scout badges, their pins on their uniform. And they're the ones toting the luggage because there were no men to do that. And so, you know, it's just a neat snapshot of Greensboro history. And of course, we cover the railroad history pretty well. There's a couple neat pictures in there of the Liberty Bell. You know, the Liberty Bell was in downtown Greensboro at the depot. Crazy, right? It went down to Atlanta for a centennial exhibition. Came up to Greensboro, then downtown Greensboro, and then they switched it from the Southern Railway to the Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley, and dragged it down to the battlefield for. They were doing a battlefield reenactment or something like that, and so in an open open flat car, you know, a Pennsylvania Railroad open flat car is our national treasure, and they got mad because too many people went up there and took little chips off of it as souvenirs. But you know, so yeah, there's just some really neat stuff that we got to put in the book. A couple other things that happened while we had already done the layout. We came up with a North Carolina Railroad button. I mean, that's got to be pre-1871. It's clearly North Carolina. There's a picture of it in the book. Our chapter bought that and has preserved it. We bought some Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley buttons that were amazing. I mean, we really tried hard to gather up this history and preserve it. So I really appreciate you letting us come out and talk to you. I enjoyed it greatly. And if you have any questions, please ask. Thank you.